Now let's look at equity. So we're looking at equity balances and equity transactions. So here we have a lot of questions relating to all these management assertions. So for completeness, the question is, has management included all equity on the balance sheet? So is all equity included? The question is also is whether all equity that has been included by the management, does it exist? Whether equity exists. Another question is whether equity has been recorded at the correct value. Whether the equity is actually an obligation of the entity, equity is owed. Now, for equity, when you have smaller companies, they generally issue stock certificates to their shareholders. If it's bigger companies, generally you would want to go to the registrar and transfer agents to understand about the equity that the company is issued, the amount of equity that's issued and outstanding. So here, when we're looking at the existence assertion, we can do a confirmation with registrar and transfer agent. Now, if it's a smaller company having stock certificates issued out, we could, let's say, inspect, actually vouch. So we could start with the financials, look at the stock certificate book, and then also look at the minutes of the meeting which authorized the issuance of stock. So we could vouch in reverse order for existence. Now same thing, when we are looking at completeness, again, if it's bigger companies, you would again look at confirmation. So you would again look at confirmation with registrar and transfer agent. You might want to inspect or trace. Now in case of completeness, you would want to trace in order for completeness. You would go from the minutes to the stock certificates to the financial statements. Now on stock certificate books, so one is confirmation. On the stock certificate books, you could look at all the stock certificate stubs. That's the company's copy. So stock certificate stubs. You might want to look at unused stock certificates. You might want to look at cancelled stock certificates. So unused, cancelled. See, in existence, whatever is recorded here, does it exist? In completeness, whatever should have been recorded, has it been recorded? So here you're looking at unused stock certificates, you're looking at cancelled stock certificates, you're basically looking at all stock certificates to make sure all equity that should have been recorded has been recorded. Now in equity balances, equity transactions, we're also looking at treasury stock. So you would want to make sure that you inspect and make sure all treasury stock is recorded. Again, for existence, all treasury stock that has been recorded, does it actually exist? Now, so that was about completeness and existence for equity. When you're looking at valuation for equity, so under valuation, you would want to recalculate dividends, retained earnings, treasury stock. For dividends, you got to be sure of the dividend declaration date, dividend record date, and the dividend payout date. We'll learn about these in detail in FAR, but now understand these dates. We have that on the book, we'll see that. So that's about recalculating dividends. Then you have retained earnings. So if retained earning is appropriated for a purpose, make sure that's properly disclosed. So that would be about proper disclosure. Now, we are also looking at equity obligations of the company, and here we might want to inspect the articles of incorporation of the company. So you might also want to look at the bylaws of the company to make sure that the right amount is authorized, issued, outstanding. They have not over issued equity and they have obligations for the equity that they have issued. You would also want to look at the minutes of the meeting of the shareholders, of the board of directors, to be sure about equity as an obligation for the company. Naturally, everything should be properly disclosed as far as equity is concerned. Very important. So this is your question, whether proper disclosures have been made. So there should be proper disclosures for stock options, for all stuff related to equity, appropriation of retained earnings, dividends. So guys, equity is very important. Want to make sure that you test all management assertions as far as equity is concerned. And here we are looking at stockholders' equity and treasury stock. Highlight equity. So you have the table there. We know the first column, right, transactions. Second column is balances. Third one, that's right, disclosures. Now, when you're auditing equity and you're looking at the C, the completeness assertion, good audit procedures would be highlight confirmations with registrar and transfer agent. If no registrar or transfer agent, highlight inspect or examine stock certificate book. The auditor might also want to inspect, highlight stock certificate stubs, any cancelled certificates, and remaining unused or unissued certificates. Might want to do analytical procedures. And the last one, highlight inspect or examine treasury stock certificates. Treasury stock is you buy back your own equity, that becomes treasury stock. Now, under the valuation assertion for balances, highlight recalculate dividends, retained earnings, and treasury stock transactions. Under the existence assertion for balances, highlight confirmations with registrar and transfer agent. We know if there is no registrar or transfer agent, highlight inspect or examine stock certificate book. You might want to highlight inspect or vouch capital stock entries to minutes. Because think about it, without being approved in the meetings of the board of directors, of shareholders, you can't issue equity. You can't buy back treasury stock. So it would all be there in the minutes. So you can vouch from the capital stock entries to the minutes. Under rights and obligations, balances, highlight articles of incorporation and bylaws. So these are stuff that auditor may want to inspect or examine. Now again, he would also inspect or examine, highlight minutes. Under rights and obligations for disclosures, highlight stock options, highlight dividend restrictions. All these need to be disclosed on the financials. Now, below the table, you have the second bullet which says test of transactions approach may be adopted as it is likely to involve few transactions. Now, generally, during a year, you have only a few equity transactions, only a few treasury stock buybacks, and generally, these transactions would be high dollar amounts. So, test of transactions approach may be appropriate for testing details, testing the dollars. Now, when we're looking at equity, we're looking at highlight capital stock. So, you're looking at capital stock, APEC, then highlight retained earnings, and you're bothered about dividend. Now, when you're looking at dividend, highlight declaration date. Now, this is the date when the board of directors commit to the dividend. It becomes a liability as of this date. Next, highlight record date. So, shareholders at this record date are identified and entitled to the dividend. Payment date, highlight this. This is the date when the dividend distribution is actually made to the shareholders who were holding the stock as of the record date. So declaration date is when you declare dividends. Record date is a date on which shareholders on that record date are entitled to dividend. Payment date, the dividend is actually paid out. Now we learn in FAR that as of record date, there is no journal entry. You have a journal entry on declaration date when dividend becomes a liability, a journal entry on payment date when dividend is actually paid out.